So it's very important. And then also your children having an environment of love in your family, in your house. Your children should feel love. You want your children to be an environment of love. The Prophet ﷺ kissed his children, he hugged them. And we know that touching, children need a lot of touching. They need a lot of tactile stimulation. If you don't give them that, they actually suffer from it. We also know a lot of sociopathic behavior is the result of maltreatment when they were children. So it's very important to have a lot of love in the house. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about a hadith before I go on to the next chapter. A hadith that Imam Tabarani relates, and it's from Sayyidina Ali, and he says that the Prophet ﷺ said, أَدِّبُوا أَوْلَادُكُمْ عَلَى ثَلَاثِ خِصَالٍ. Discipline your children or raise your children with 3 characteristics or qualities. And then he said, حُبِّ نَبِيِّكُمْ, love of your Prophet, حُبِّ آلِ بَيْتِهِ, love of his family, وَتِلَاوَةَ الْقُرْآنِ. And then he talked about the maqam of the Hamalat al-Quran on the Day of Judgment. But if you look at those 3, he said the first one is loving the Prophet. Now you have to... I'm always amazed that the women always have their notebooks and pens, and they always write. The men, their memories are amazing. I just, subhanallah. Yeah, it's beautiful, man. You have to thank Allah, you know. These poor women have to write down things they hear. The men just, mashallah, it's all osmotically absorbed. You know. They don't even have to listen. You know. They're just going in. You know. It's just their pores are open to knowledge and information. It's just wonderful. It really amazes me. I've seen that over the years so many times, you know. They're taking over, you guys. You're just all sitting around watching it happen. I'm serious. You know, we're going to be in those caged things before long. You know, with the crying babies. The women are going to be on the other side. It's happening, you know. Seriously, because we'll all be so dumb, you know, that nobody will know the ahkam, and the women will just say, no, the men are supposed to be in that caged area over there, you know, Rawah al-Bukhari. Oh, man. Yeah, seriously, if they wise up, they're going to find out, my God, I did all the... Really? We don't have to do that? We don't have to do that? We don't have to do that? They've been 1,400 years, they've been tricking us all this time. Yeah, where's my servant? I'm not making that up. You know, and then you're going to have 2 jobs. And don't expect dinner when you get home. Because she doesn't have to cook either. That's why you better love them, you know. Yeah, make your own dinner. Yeah, subhanAllah. Anyway. So, where was I? Yeah, loving the Prophet ﷺ. Raise your children to love the Prophet ﷺ. You can do that, there are different ways to do that. One of them is really reminding them of the blessing of the Prophet ﷺ. Because so much in your life is from the Prophet ﷺ. So many of our blessings, we don't think about it. But so many of our blessings are from the Prophet ﷺ. And so you remind them of that. And then also telling them the stories of the Prophet ﷺ, what he did for them, inculcating in them that love. And then doing things that Islam is a sweet. You know, you take your kids, one of the things that really troubles me in the U.S. is people don't take their kids to Jumu'ah. You know, they're young teenage, you know, they should be going to Jumu'ah from about 9, 10 on. To get that experience. They don't do that. They're in school, whatever. I take my boys to the Jummah, and I watch like my 8-year-old. He's just like, it's so intense to watch him because he's really listening, you know. And then we go out and we talk about it. We went to the Jummah, and this man gave this talk about this mosque in India that the Hindus claimed the land was theirs, the Muslims claimed the land was theirs. and there was a fight, and so there was one righteous Muslim in the town, and both the Hindus and the Muslims agreed that that they would allow him to arbitrate between them because they thought he was fair. And so then the Imam's telling the story, and then he says, and then, the suspense, when the Imam decided who had the right, it was the Hindus. So my little 8-year-old looked up, I said, I knew he was going to do that. Like he knew that he was going to be fair. That was the whole point of the story. So he got the point. And then we're on the way home, he said to me, I think there was a better solution. So I was like, what was it? He said, he should have split the land, and then the Hindus could have had the one half, the Muslims the other half. They could have each built their places of worship together. And so you underestimate, the power of children and their capacity to understand things. Children are amazing, and they're very spiritual. There's a book by Chilton Pierce worth reading for mothers, which is called The Magical Teen. And one of the things that he argues in there is that the most spiritual period of a person's life is their teenage years. And what he says is our society gives no way for children to experience that. In previous cultures, even if you look at the Native American culture, they had vision quests at very early ages to find out who they were. They took them out into the wilderness, and they would go through this spiritual quest into puberty. In the Jewish tradition, you have the bar mitzvah, where you come in of age spiritually. You have to learn a certain amount of the Quran. In the Indo-Pak culture, they had the khatam, was a very important a hallmark for a young person's development, religious development. There were ways in which people their spirituality was encouraged and enhanced. So it's very important to do that with children. But, take them to Jummah. I like to take my children to the Jummah, and then I usually take them somewhere they want to go afterwards on that day. So it's a special day. So they look forward to Jummah. It's something they look forward to. And then also, Ramadan is a very opportune time to really inculcate these virtues. And then doing prayer on the Prophet ﷺ. Even a little bit, if you just do after the prayer, like the Moroccan tradition, they always do Salah al-Nabi after they finish the prayer. It's good to do prayer on the Prophet. Remind them about the Prophet. And then embody his character. Really try to embody the character. Your children are one of the great sources of your own spiritual development if you take it seriously. Because children are teachers. They test our patience. They test us in all those things that we're told to practice with other people. Children test us with that. And vice versa. For children, they're tested by their parents. So it's something they also need to learn to deal with. So there's a lot that you can do. Loving the Prophet is very important. Knowing his story. Knowing where he went. Taking your children to Mecca and Medina. Taking them to these places. Letting them see. It's very exciting for them. My 8-year-old was so upset today that he didn't get to go to these places because my wife woke him up and he was so tired from yesterday. She woke him up and she said, it's time to go. And he just went back to sleep. And then when he woke up later, he said, did they go? And she said, yeah. Why didn't you wake me up? And she said, I did. He said, no, you should have thrown water on me. I mean, that's how, he really wanted to go. So you can't underestimate the impact that these things have on young people, even at a young age. My most profound experience as a child, growing up, when I was 12 years old, we went on a Sierra Club hike into the wilderness for 10 days. And we had to prepare, we had to learn all this stuff, we did preparation with backpacks. We had to go every weekend just walking up this Mount Tamalpais with National Geographics in our backpacks just to get used to carrying the weight. But it was that experience to me, I can almost tell you everything that happened on that journey because it was a discovery for me of being out in the wilderness, of what nature was like. And we went to this place called Crystal Lake, which takes 3 days to hike to. Up in the mountains. There's no roads to it. It's a beautiful lake in California. We swam in the lake, crystal clear water, and one of the counselors, our counselor this is in the 70s. He was a staunch environmentalist because my mother was into the environmental. We were doing recycling in the late 60s. I'm not making this up. And that's how my mother was, just always ahead of the curve on those type things. And she would bundle. We had biodegradable soap in our house in the early 70s. My mother wouldn't do anything, she was, and she used to, we had to bundle all the paper. We hated it, as kids, it's your mom. And, but later I just really, really appreciated, because what my mother taught all of us, I think, and what we really recognized in her, was my mother was never a talker. She wasn't the type of person that gave speeches, or she actually just did what she believed. And we saw it in her actions. She was civil rights. She was out there marching. It wasn't like we should have integration. She took my sister and drove her to an all-black school before they integrated in the early 60s. We've got my sister's yearbooks. She's the only white face. They're all black. I'm not making this up. And my sister was traumatized by it. It was very difficult for her to do that, because it was Marin City, it was an all-black environment, and most of the people there did not interact with white kids. So my sister was the only white kid in this whole school, but my mom believed in integration. She just thought, her mother was from the South. Her mother left the South because of the black and white in the 30s. My grandmother, she married, moved to San Francisco. She came out with her brother. They left the South because they didn't like the whole way the South functioned. They went to the most progressive place in America, which at that time was San Francisco and probably still is. But she lived those things. My mother always lived those things. Those had a big impact on me. A large part of my whole view of the world came from my mother. So you can't underestimate the impact that mothers have on their children. And also the spiritual openness to things. I was very open to those things as a youngster and curious about these things and why they were doing these things. So those type things you can do with your children just to inculcate that love in them. And then the other thing he said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, وَحُبِّ آلِ بَيْتِي, the love of his family, which is very important. The family of the Prophet ﷺ is obviously the Al-Bayt, is the uncles of the Prophet, Hamza radiallahu anhu, Sayyidina Hamza. We go visit him, honor him, the Shuhada of Uhud. And Al-Abbas, Aqil, who's Shaykh Abdullah Al-Qadi's grandfather. All these people, we honor them and love them. And then their children, and then the children, Ja'far, the cousins, and their children, Al-Ja'far. Last night I was with 5 or 6 of them. Just from Al-Ahsad, they're from Al-Ja'far. And you should love them because they're the children of the Prophet's family. And anybody who has intisab, many people have intisab. Some people look at it like, how's that possible? Well, it's very easy. The majority of people on the earth, according to Khalid Blanchard, probably have some blood from the Prophet ﷺ, even the non-Muslims. Queen Elizabeth claims it in her lineage. John Kerry, if you look at peerage, Bert's peerage, John Kerry has, the man that ran for president, he has blood from the family of the Prophet ﷺ through a Persian connection. So a lot of people have blood. But descendants are people that have a lineage directly to the Prophet with a tree. Now, there are people that don't have that. I mean, they have trees, but they're not real. That's true, because it was a very prestigious thing. So you find that. But what I've noted is that there are people that have firasa and can see the family. And I've seen this many, many times. I really have. I'll give you one example. There's a man in Mauritania, Muhammad Zain, who's a sharif, very spiritual man, really amazing, scholar, lives out there. He's the only person I've ever seen Marab al-Hajj actually get up to greet and when he comes to visit. But I brought somebody from New York who was there, Egyptian, and we visited. And Muhammad Zain said to me, is he a sharif? And I said, not that I know of. And he said, no, he's a Hassani, he's from the family of Hassan. And I told the person that they didn't know about it. When we got back to New York, I asked his mother, what their lineage was. And she said, well, my grandfather says that we're Hassanis. but I never took that seriously. I've seen that many times. I mean, I was with somebody in here, we were in Morocco, and one of the people there also asked me, is that person from the Sada, from India? And I said, yes. And he said, mashallah, ahlan bisada. So there's people that see it like it's real. And some of them, they've got, I saw a man the other day, it was so clearly a Sayyid, and I just said, are you from the Sada? He just started crying. Because a lot of them are ashamed of it now. It's like they feel so much shortcoming, because of the responsibility. But really honoring the family of the Prophet. There's no doubt some of the family abused their rank amongst the Muslims, because Muslims used to really take this very seriously. In Egypt, it was a law during the Mamluk period. You had to actually wear a turban to distinguish that you were from the family, so that nobody from the family would be insulted or mistreated. So the men had to wear green turbans. It was actually a law. If you were a Sayyid, you were supposed to wear a distinctive badge of honor. So many of the great ulama were Sada. There's also ghulu in it. Some of the Shia tradition go to an extreme and say that the A'imma are infallible. We don't believe that. They're human beings. They make mistakes. And so some of the Sada have abused that. But even Sidi Ahmed Zarruq said, even if they abuse it, or they're sinners, or they're distant from Allah, you should always have compassion and mercy for them, and look at them as your best friend and most beloved's child, that you just feel bad for them. Like you don't have any animosity towards them. Even if they do something to you wrong, you don't. And that's why Imam Malik, when he was whipped unjustly by the governor here, who was a descendant of the Prophet ﷺ, he said that every time the soldier raised the whip, he asked forgiveness for Mansur for doing that, because of his place in relation to the Prophet ﷺ. That's love. So it's important to really love the family. And the Muslims have lost this quality. We've just lost adab, we've lost, traditionally they always made sure that the Sada, if they were there, because they're descendants of the Prophet ﷺ. And then on the other hand, to the Sada, because there are people in here that are related to the Prophet, there's an obligation to be noblesse oblige, like the French say. Nobility obliges you to behave in certain ways. So there's an onus also on the Sada to behave with dignity, to not do things that are inappropriate for their... this is true for anybody, but in particular, more so. It's like fasting. When you fast, it's haram to backbite. But when you fast, it's really haram. Do you know, when you're in Mecca, things are not the same as when you're outside of Mecca. It's still haram to do certain things, but in Mecca, it's really haram. It's much more serious. And the same is true for the Sada. It's the way it is, because the blood of the Prophet runs in their veins, and the Prophet never intended for any of his offspring to be other than righteous servants of God. There's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. That was his desire. He made dua for his own dhurriya. So no matter how far they go astray, they're still his children, and we should hope for the best for them and good for them always. Make dua for them. Treat them with courtesy always. Because they're Sada. And if they're ulama, then they have a double right. They're Sayyid and Alim, they have double right. Ibn Abbas, Usama bin Zayd, when he took Ibn Abbas out, Ibn Abbas was taking him out, and he said, no, this is far enough. And he said, no, we were commanded to do this with our ulama, because he was from the ulama. And he kissed him, and he said, we are commanded to do this with the family of the Prophet ﷺ. And we know that Sayyidina Omar used to take Al-Abbas out in Sahih al-Bukhari. And when the drought would come, he would take Al-Abbas out and make shafa'ah with the uncle of the Prophet and say, we used to do this with the Prophet. When he was here, we would do it with him. Now we're doing it with Abbas. To show the people that the family of the Prophet is still with us. Their presence among us is part of the prophetic presence in the world. And that's why it's important for them to be people of generosity. The Sada should be the most generous people. And traditionally, they were given money just so they could be generous. And that's why a portion of the booty, the fifth, goes to the family to take care of all their needs, but also so that they could distribute it and be generous, and it creates love, engenders love in the people. So it's the only, every religion, Islam is an egalitarian religion. There's no doubt about that, but there are distinctions amongst people. And the distinctions are primarily distinctions of piety and learning. Those are first and foremost. But lineage does have its place. There's no doubt about that. The Prophet talked about good families. It's also recognized in the Shafi'i madhab. It's not Maliki. My madhab teaches there's no distinction in lineage. But in the Shafi'i madhab, they recognize lineage as something that is in marriage and things like that it can be a reason for incompatibility in the Shafi'i madhab, not in the Maliki. But certainly the Al-Bayt of the Prophet ﷺ, they do have that distinction, just by the mere fact that they're descendants of the Prophet. And that is true also for Quraysh generally. And then for the Ashraf are people related to the family, not directly, like the Alawiyin, people from Ali's other wives, not from Fatima. The Sada are from Fatima, and they go through Hassan and Hussein. The Hussainis are mostly in the east, the Hassanis are mostly in the west, because the family split during the tribulations. And they were massacred, killed, a lot of them were literally butchered. They're very afraid of them because of the Shia revolutions against the Umayyad and the Abbasid power, and the fear of the rise of the family's claims to the caliphate. That's where that comes from. So there was a lot of real treachery, a lot of killing. But you should love the family and honor them, because they're the children of our Prophet ﷺ. And he loves them. I mean, I've seen people, somebody came up to me once, and I just knew she wasn't really practicing Islam. I didn't assume that, but I just felt that. And she started telling me about these dreams of the Prophet she was having. And I just said, "Are you a descendant of the Prophet?" And she was like, "How'd you know?" And the only way I knew was, there's no way he would come to people that weren't, if they're not really practicing, unless he's got some special connection with them. So that happens to his own children. And that's why he does intercede for them. In Nafkhat al-Ula, there's no, La ansab bainahum yawma idin. The Quran says there's no nasab on the first nafkha. There's no nasab. But on the second one, there is. He intercedes for his family. And people that don't believe that are just wrong. He intercedes for his family. And he says, "La as'alukum alayhi al-ajra illa al-muwaddata fil qurba." Say, I'm not asking you a reward for this deen. I'm not asking you for any money, but love my family. That's in the Quran. So it's part of our deen to love the family of the Prophet. And then the other thing I'd add for the Sada and the Ashraf is that those people who do not practice and especially don't show a lot of commitment to the religion, they always have tribulation. It's just a given. You're going to have tribulation. They have a lot of depression in the family, a lot of poverty, calamities, children. Just you see it. There's a lot, and that's why it's very important. And part of that's all purification. Because if there's not a real mujahada going on, they'll get it from other ways. يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. Allah says in the Quran, He wants to remove from the family of the Prophet all impurities and to purify them. So they often go through a lot of tribulations. There's books written on it. Maqatir al-Tarbiyyin, the Abu Faraj al-Isbahani is one of the great books about all the horrible things that happened to the family and why. And it's really, to me, it's a proof of Islam. It's like Bani Israel. Bani Israel, a chosen group of people. Allah chose them. It's undeniable. Anybody that knows Jews, they have to recognize that about Jews. They have special qualities. They just do. It's as simple as that. It's undeniable. And they know it too. They sense it. They're always in the universities in the United States. Look where they are. They're on the first chairs and They're always doing. They're sharp people. They're very intelligent people. They're outstrippers in many of their fields. They're great contributors to a lot of things. They have a lot of gifts. God's given them a lot of gifts. With those gifts come immense responsibility. They also have had immense tribulation in the world, because Allah doesn't give anything special to people without expecting something from them. And if they don't do that, they have tribulations. And that's what even the Orthodox Jews, that's what they consider those tribulations are from abandonment of the Torah. I mean, that's their own position about that. So it's very important for the Muslims in general, but for the family in specific, to be aware of their duties and their service. And you'll find many people in our community that are serving this deen the most. You'll find they're often related. I've seen that in many places. You'll find some of the most active people, and that it's from that blessing and prayers that were made for them and for their offspring and their family. But you will find that in many communities. And then if somebody's married to a sharif, they have to honor that. It's especially if it's a non-sharif with a woman, they really have to be careful. With the man also, just honoring the sharaf. Because it's a thing. They also have to honor. It's a two-way street, and I'm not denying that. But like I said, the onus is on us to honor the children of the Prophet. Whether they honor that lineage or not is their business. But the onus is on us to honor